Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to Shloka Day. Today is the last Shloka of chapter 12 and also the last Shloka of the middle 6 chapters. Shloka number 20 of chapter 12. Ye tu dharmamritamidam
Etu dharmamritam idam
yatoktam paryupasate
yathoktam paryupasate
shraddhadhana matparama
yadhadhana matparama
bhaktastetiva me priya.
bhaktaste tiva me priyaha.
But for meaning, translation, and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ye,
Yea,
those who,
those who
tu,
do
but,
but
dharma,
dharma
of religion,
of religion,
amritam,
amritam,
nectar,
nectar,
idam,
idam,
this,
is
yatha,
yatha,
as,
as
uktam,
uktam,
said,
said,
paryupasate,
paryupasate,
completely engage,
completely engaged,
shraddhadhana,
Shraddhadhana,
with faith,
with faith,
matparamaha,
matparamaha,
taking me, the Supreme Lord, as everything,
taking me, the Supreme Lord, as everything,
bhaktaha,
bhaktaha,
devotees,
devotees,
te,
they,
they, ativa,
ativa,
very, very,
very,
may,
may,
to me,
to me,
priyaha,
priyaha,
dear.
dear,
Translation: those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service
those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service
and who completely engage themselves with faith,
and who completely engage themselves with faith,
making me the supreme goal,
making me the supreme goal,
are very, very dear to me.
are very dear to me.
Prabhupada writes in the purport, in this chapter, from verse 2 through the end, from Maya Vesha Mano Ye Mam, fixing the mind on me, through Ye Tu Dharmamritamidam, this religion of eternal engagement, the Supreme Lord has explained the processes of transcendental service for approaching Him. Such processes are very dear to the Lord, and He accepts a person engaged in them. The question of who is better, one who is engaged in the path of impersonal Brahman, or one who is engaged in the personal service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was raised by Arjuna. And the Lord replied to him so explicitly that there is no doubt that devotional service to the Personality of Godhead is the best of all processes of spiritual realization. In other words, in this chapter, it is decided that through good association, one develops attachment for pure devotional service and thereby accepts a bona fide spiritual master, and from him begins to hear and chant and observe the regulative principles of devotional service with faith, attachment, and devotion, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. This path is recommended in this chapter. Therefore, there is no doubt that devotional service is the only absolute path for self realization, for the attainment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The impersonal conception of the Supreme Absolute Truth, as described in this chapter, is recommended only up to the time one surrenders himself for self realization. In other words, as long as one does not have the chance to associate with a pure devotee, the impersonal conception may be beneficial. In the impersonal conception of the Absolute Truth, one works without fruitive result, meditates, and cultivates knowledge to understand spirit and matter. This is necessary as long as one is not in the association of a pure devotee. Fortunately, if one develops directly a desire to engage in Krishna consciousness in pure devotional service, he does not need to undergo step-by-step improvements in spiritual realization. Devotional service, as described in the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, is more congenial. One need not bother about materials to keep body and soul together, because by the grace of the Lord, everything is carried out automatically. So Prabhupada is stating in this particular purport that the Lord has emphatically established for Arjuna that practicing Bhakti Yoga is superior to worshipping the impersonal Brahman. It is not that worshipping impersonal Brahman is wrong. It is also a legitimate path, but it is nevertheless a very difficult path. And Prabhupada is explaining here that for those who want to engage in impersonal worship of Brahman, they can do so as long as and up to the point they meet a pure devotee. Once they meet a pure devotee, then they can take to Bhakti Yoga. So in essence, in chapter 12, the first 7 shlokas related to Arjuna's question about whether worshipping the personal form of the Lord is superior or whether impersonal Brahman worship is superior, to which the Lord says worship of the personal form is better and best. Then the Lord talks about the reverse ladder of the progressive stages of bhakti, starting with the highest of always thinking about Him. If you can't think about Him, practice sadhana bhakti, etc. If you can't do that, then work for Him. If you can't do that, then work without attachment to the results, and so on and so forth. Then the rest of the chapter, shlokas 13 to 20, the Lord talks about the qualities of His devotees that endears them to Him. So this chapter talks about how bhakti is the best process for transcendence, then how bhakti can be practiced at multiple levels, and how one will cultivate qualities that will make one a devotee. So a quick summary of the middle 6 chapters, starting with the 7th chapter. So the 7th chapter is called Jnana Vijnana Yoga, the knowledge of the Absolute, in which Krishna introduces us to how He pervades the material world and how different people are surrendering to Him directly, indirectly. Some deride Him, some approach Him inquisitively. So He describes all these various categories. The 7th chapter provides us an intellectual foundation for leading a life of devotion by telling Krishna's ultimate position and the position of Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna establishes His position as the Supreme Absolute Truth and also the devotee's position as the topmost. In the 8th chapter, Krishna is comparing Ashtanga Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So if you recall, the 8th chapter is about dying, because the 7th chapter ends with the shloka where the Lord says that if somebody remembers me as Adi Yajna, Adi Daiva, Adi Bhautika, then at the time of death, they don't have to take birth again. So the 8th chapter is the difference between how the Ashtanga yogis, specifically the Yoga Mishra Bhakta, leaves their body compared to how a Bhakti yogi need not worry about meeting all those criteria, the proper time of the year, the proper time, the fortnight in a month, the proper time of the day, etc. So Bhakti Yoga is preferable because it is easier. Krishna uses the word Sulabha in the 8th chapter. And then Krishna says in the same chapter that one doesn't have to worry about other things, like whether one is dying at the right time or not, because the Lord will make sure that for a devotee, that everything will work out perfectly. In the 9th chapter, Krishna, which is called Rajavidya, Akshara Brahma Yoga is the title of the 8th chapter. In the 9th chapter, which is Rajavidya Rajaguhya Yoga, which is the most confidential aspect, Krishna talks about pure devotional service and how one practices pure devotional service in various ways. The various glories of pure devotional service are described. And first of all, Krishna's position is described. the various kinds of people, the Mayavadis, the Ananya Bhaktas, and then the three kinds of Jnana yogis are described, Ekatvena, Pritakttvena, and Bahuda Vishvato Mukham. Then how devotional service actually elevates one beyond the inherent faults and other faults. So Krishna warns us in the 9th chapter that we should not see the faults of his devotees. Even if his devotees fall down, Krishna says in his eyes they are a sadhu. And Krishna in the very next shloka says very quickly, I make them righteous and perfect, so much so that they come back to me. So devotional service is easy to perform. It gives us the eternal results. All of this is discussed in the 9th chapter. In the 10th chapter, Krishna talks about his Vibhuti Yoga. So, how does one understand Krishna through his opulences? Krishna begins the 10th chapter by saying, the demigods don't know me, the great sages don't know me, because I am the origin of both of them. So essentially, Krishna is saying the created cannot understand the creator. Then, when he speaks about himself like this, Krishna also begins to talk about how he is the source of all the material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from him. And in that 8th shloka that begins the Chatushloke Gita, 8, 9, 10, and 11. How by performing bhakti yoga we attract his mercy. And after that, Arjuna says, yes, I've heard the same thing. You are declaring yourself as the supreme absolute truth. I've heard this from Narada, Asita, Vyasa, Devala, Muni, etc. And then Arjuna asks, can you describe your opulences? How are we to always remember you? And which form are we to remember you? So Krishna gives many, many, many examples using matter, using analogies of different aspects of life to give us examples of how we can think of him. So from Mount Meru to the Himalayas, to the lion, to the shark, to various different famous personalities, Krishna gives many examples of how you can remember him. And then in the 11th chapter, Krishna, or rather Arjuna, wants to see the actual Virat Rupa form of the Lord. And the Lord shows his Virat Rupa form, which perturbs Arjuna. So much so he says, yeah, I am not happy seeing this form of yours. I would rather see your four-handed form and finally your two-handed form. So this 12th chapter gives again one more conclusion that bhakti leads to jnana or jnana leads to bhakti. Bhakti, actually, the two children of bhakti are jnana and vairagya. At this point, Krishna says that practicing bhakti is better than practicing jnana. That means worshipping the personal absolute truth is far better than worshipping the impersonal absolute truth. Why? Because it is very difficult and troublesome, Krishna says. Then Krishna talks about the various levels of bhakti, how he casts his net wider and wider and wider to accept so many people practicing different levels of transcendental observances to worship him. Then Krishna talks about the various qualities that endear us to him, and in this way the bhakti chapter section ends, and the next section will begin with chapter 13. So essentially the entire middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita are glorifying Bhagavan, the Bhakta, who's practicing bhakti to re-establish his sambandha with the Supreme Lord. Now, when we begin the 13th chapter, we're going to look at how Jnana Yoga ultimately culminates in Bhakti Yoga.
If you like our videos, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell notification. If you'd like to join our classes every day, please check the details in the description section of this video. We look forward to serving you.